Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back. Today, we'll be concluding John Carpenter's Apocalypse Trilogy with Prince of Darkness, the middle child of the bunch. Yeah, kind of messed up the chronology there. Prince of Darkness wasn't well received, but that seems to be a running trend with Carpenter's films. Much like The Thing, it was reviewed terribly by critics, who considered it another dumpster fire. And it really baffles me that they were so critical. I mean, come on, guys! Even a dumpster fire gives off heat! Irregardless, this is Prince of Darkness. The film begins, like all great stories, with the death of a priest, and he's holding an important, mysterious box. We then see one of our main characters, Brian Marsh, and his fabulous porno moustache. It's so fabulous, I just can't not think of this every time he's on screen. It's also clear he has the hots for another member of this ensemble, Catherine. The priest's body is eventually found, and Donald Pleasance is told about the death. He also reads the priest's notes while taking the box. And rather unoriginally, Pleasance is named Father Loomis. Presumably this is before he became a psychiatrist to Michael Myers. But that is an unofficial name, as he's never actually called that. However, he will be the voice for the supernatural throughout the film. We then meet another main character. Yeah, you can tell this film has a lot of them. A Professor Birack, played by Victor Wong, and he will very much be the voice of science throughout the film. The concept for the film, science meets religion, is very much an H.P. Lovecraft idea. However, this is not part of H.P. Lovecraft Month. But it does have many of its elements, which I will be getting into. I really like that science/religion mashup. However, the film doesn't really do it justice and kind of lets one take over the other. As the professor is walking to class, he notices that the sun is looking a bit strange, especially with the moon right next to it, and a large colony of ants nearby subtly implies things aren't as they seem. And with Loomis, he reveals the mysterious box held a mysterious key. Meanwhile, Birack gives his class on physics and states that thanks to quantum physics, everything you know about the world collapses when examined at the subatomic level, setting up the idea of the supernatural as something not yet measured by science. Loomis has gone to a church, also the priest's home, using the key on a specific door. However, we won't get to see what he finds quite yet. And the next day, Loomis sends a nun to Birack requesting a meeting, but pleads with him to help. Which is quite telling of just how severe the problem is. I mean, it really must be a sign of the end of days for a priest to consult a scientist. But it also shows that Father Loomis is thinking very practically and is not messing around, as all that religious politics is just thrown out of the window. And that evening we see Marsh doing what all students at college do, playing solitaire. So he's either smart enough to not need to study, or is just an incredible slacker. However, the TV show catches his attention, as it's about a newly discovered supernova, which might actually explain some phenomena we'll see later in the film. And bizarrely, the TV is covered in those same ants we saw earlier. However, it's not explained what they're doing there. It's just added spookiness, I think. Loomis has returned to the church with Birack to do some preliminary investigation of what he's found. As they go into the basement, Loomis explains the history.
Built in the 1500s by arrangement with the Spanish government.
Even if his history is a little off, considering the Spanish didn't colonize California with missions until 1769. However, Birack is finally shown to the good stuff. The church was guarded by a secret society of priests, the Brotherhood of Sleep, secret to even the Vatican itself. It's then revealed, in a large chamber covered in crucifixes, what they were guarding, and it's... Well, not a river, Ray just got overexcited, but it is indeed a giant vat of green swirling slime, which as an effect is not particularly impressive. However, and I say this a lot with Carpenter's films, because it's a practical effect, it has this real air of gravitas, because it really is a giant vat of slime. Okay, it's not particularly impressive in and of itself, but it will do other things throughout the movie to elevate it somewhat. There's also a book next to the vat written in many different languages, also numerically encoded, and to make it even more difficult to decipher, the text is distorted due to the book being written, erased, and rewritten over and over again. It truly emphasizes this thing has existed throughout the centuries, and is possibly older than most civilizations. And the following scene of Catherine explaining Schrodinger's cat theory to a fellow classmate is very appropriate, as the idea of something being in constant flux until it's observed will become significant. Back at the college, the physics class has gotten news that Birack wants them to help him with his new project, and they'll be staying at the church to do that. However, Marsh wants some extracurricular activities with Catherine. Birack has gathered all the students and tells them what will be required, sweetening the deal with a promise of increasing their grade average. However, it doesn't escape their notice that he's reluctant to specify what they'll be doing. And back at the church, Birack already notices strange behaviour from the homeless who live around it, with one woman covered in those same ants. The ants are a recurring element of the film, and although in the scheme of things they are a relatively pointless addition to the story, what they do show is that this thing, whatever it may be, is affecting everything, from humans to insects. It's something epic and monumental. At the church, both Father Loomis and Birack are engaged in a philosophical and theocratic argument. The father maintains that Satan, although he never says the name, lives in everything and is powered by people like Birack who believe in logic and reasoning.
It's your disbelief that powers him. Your stubborn faith in common sense that allows his deception.
Yeah, apparently even common sense is the work of the devil. Although, I think Loomis saying that is a fault of the writing. It feels like he was written to be incredibly religious to contrast the scientists. However, when you have a religious figure simply outright state that basic common sense is evil, even for me, that's a bit too on the nose. And rather contradictory, Loomis uses common sense in his reasoning for bringing Birack in on this. He wants the scientists to confirm their discovery and convince the world of its evil, which is genuinely a clever idea, because he knows people will trust data as opposed to a raving reverend. Marsh and Catherine talk some more at the end of the day, and Marsh is still barking at that tree.
Actually, I was hoping you'd have a cup of coffee with me again.
Okay, I'll stop using the goofy porno music now. It was just a comment on the guy's moustache. Clear? Coffee in this is just coffee. God damn it, I knew it! The moustache never lies. I had you pegged from the beginning, Marsh. Moving on, the homeless around the church are mobilising and organising into more of a mob, with none other than Alice Cooper himself as a de facto leader. He's in this movie because Cooper's manager was also a producer of the film, so it's a bit of quid pro quo going on. Cooper also recorded a song titled Prince of Darkness. While the homeless watch, the crew arrive at the church. Whoa, don't just shrug at that. Did you see the same thing as we did? Isn't this cause for alarm even a little bit? They barely mention it again and act like it's just a few homeless people hanging around. But that's pretty damn creepy to find. Everyone is setting up with more scientists brought into the project, and one Dr. Leahy introduces himself to Birack, who seems a bit scatterbrained.
We have some equipment, find the spot over there. We're making this the central lab.
Oh, sure. Well, what are we actually doing here?
That was actually a 100% genuine reaction then from the actor, who wasn't actually expecting Victor Wong to just walk off. It's a fun moment made better by the improvised nature of it. After more setting up of equipment, Marsh at least has started taking notice of the homeless people who are surrounding the church. But they still consider them harmless. They mention it, but then swiftly move on like it's not even slightly weird. But outside, Loomis gets first-hand experience of the homeless people when one approaches him. And it's not what she says that's creepy, it's how she says it.
It's so wonderful what you're doing, Father. Opening the church again.
I love how creepy that was. Just a simple distorting of her voice to give that deep down feeling of something being very wrong here, and you can't quite put your finger on it. Of course, the fact that she's carrying around a can of worms and flesh about doesn't really help. Now Loomis has arrived, he takes everyone to see the vat, who become quite rightly speechless at what they're looking at. Loomis feels its powers are growing, with one of the team, Calder, very much affected by it. Quite frankly, I have no idea what they're talking about. Tastes pretty good to me. Anyway, Catherine is entering equations which are relayed to Marsh in the basement. The peculiar part, though, is that they are differential equations taken directly from the book, translated from the Latin. So yeah, a 2,000-year-old book is somehow using math not invented until 1671. And to add to it, weirdness is happening upstairs. Ugh, guys... You know you gotta leave the window open a crack for the worms to go as they please. They're house worms. They should be able to walk around freely. Now let them in and give them a saucer of milk. Meanwhile, Birak is overseeing the translation, which ominously implies Satan himself is sealed in the vat. It's also revealed to be an incredibly terrible prison, if indeed it is one, because scans of the vat reveal its elaborate locking mechanism can only be opened from inside. Which makes me wonder, why does this secret society of priests matter when the thing can just be opened and nothing can contain it? Why haven't they submerged it in concrete or something similar? I just think a disused church covered in crucifixes ain't gonna cut it. But that's just me. There is a rather strange moment when one of the researchers, Kelly, makes note that the homeless aren't acting like schizophrenics. They're not moving, whereas chronic schizophrenics repeat actions and phrases. Her words, not mine. Firstly, that's not schizophrenia at all. But also, why is she assuming they're schizophrenic? Just because they're homeless? Seems like a very strange conclusion to jump to. Kelly is also complaining about a bruise on her arm that suddenly appeared, which will be important later. At the end of the night, Leahy's intern leaves but finds a dead pigeon crucified, and when he investigates, the homeless come out of the woodworks, with Alice Cooper looking quite threatening with a half of a bicycle, which leads to... And this particular goofy death is included mainly because that bicycle was a prop from Cooper's show, and they just really wanted to use it. That's also the last time we'll see Alice Cooper in this film as well. Back inside, Marsh has words with Birak, mainly because all the readings they found say the contents of the vat are self-organising, and for lack of a better descriptor, impossible. Although, maybe that's because their science makes no sense.
No, for the last 4 hours I've been carbon dating the corrosion on the lid there. We're talking about 7 million years.
How exactly does she carbon date something that doesn't contain carbon? And how she got 7 million years is a complete mystery, because even if she did somehow manage to carbon date corrosion, it's still only useful up to 60,000 years. But regardless, it's time for the vat to make its move, as when Susan is left alone, it starts leaking. Upstairs, the group are going over the translation, which says the vat possibly contains the essence of Satan, placed by an ancient evil referred to as Satan's father, and Christ was crucified for trying to warn mankind about it, since they thought he was crazy. Even though Loomis wasn't aware of this information, it does slightly mirror his own actions, because Jesus tried to warn people and was thought of as crazy, so now Loomis is trying to use science and reasoning to prove it. It also subtly implies that maybe everything that's happening is predetermined. There are other reasons for that as well, but that's for later. Back in the basement, Susan has found that the liquid has formed a huge pool in the ceiling, and while looking, mouth agape, the pool pisses in her face. She starts to convulse and choke as a result. Meanwhile, upstairs, the equipment picked up the activity, and once the liquid has done its job, Susan is completely possessed, subjected to the vat's whims, whatever those might be. Susan is spotted upstairs by one of the team, who's not affected by her creepy skulking about, yet disappearing when she's needed. The guy searches the basement, as Susan seems to lead him down there, and once he gets distracted by one of the machines, which is 3 down already. This thing works efficiently. It's now time for Birak to give his own theory on what exactly is in the vat, stating that if God controls everything down to the subatomic level for the greater good, then from antimatter comes this anti-God. Loomis laments the fact that humanity wasn't told the truth, with Birak asserting that's the reason they're here, to finally confirm it for the rest of the world. Loomis's response is all too true in this day and age.
Only the corrupt are listened to now. And they tell us what we want to hear.
You're welcome to interpret that however you wish, but you have to admit it's pretty prophetic. Outside the building, 3 of the scientists are arguing about the reasons they're present. One of them is called Wyndham, referring to the Midwich Cuckoo's author, and also the film, The Village of the Damned, that Carpenter remade 8 years later. He just wants to leave, not believing anything he's heard, and he clearly can't be persuaded to stay. However, much like the last guy who tried to leave, and with Susan looking on, seemingly controlling a swarm of beetles, Wyndham is subsequently stabbed to death by another one of the homeless, as bugs seem to do something strange with his body. Kind of missed a trick there by not using Cooper again, but oh well, dead is dead, I guess. Back inside with the translation, a section of the book talks about a chosen one. You know, like these things kinda tend to do, with a symbol to go with the passage to identify said chosen one. The scene is actually pretty quick, in a blink and you'll miss it kind of way, despite its large significance. One of the team, Walter, is currently sleeping, and now we finally discover why the priests who guarded the vat were called the Brotherhood of Sleep. As Walter dreams, it's quite strange. Firstly, it looks like someone is recording a TV screen, because that's exactly what they did. The contents of the dream are very interesting, as we see a dark figure emerge from the doors of the church. However, a voice in the dream claims it's not a dream, but a broadcast from another year, only getting the first 2 digits, 19, out before Walter is woken up by Marsh. The dream is a surprising element of science fiction in this horror, and of course, with the mention of string theory earlier on in the film, it makes sense that they would put that into practice with a very rudimentary form of seeing into the future. However, I have to assume that a lot of the details of the dream are forgotten when the dreamer wakes up, because the details that are given in the dream are not vague at all. But I'll go more into detail a bit later. Waking up Walter, Marsh wonders where the hell everyone has disappeared to, and while they search for people, Susan sets her sights on recruiting another member. At the same time, the dream occurs again, a bit longer this time, showing more of the shadowy figure emerging from the door, implying that whatever the dream is, it's progressing, albeit slowly. It's revealed Birak was the dreamer, and Loomis explains that everyone close to the vat will have that vision now. Susan makes her move, and things are looking to get quite sexy. Oh yes. That is until things get sexy just for a very specific demographic. And while Susan makes another possessed, in the basement, Walter and Marsh search for the broken neck guy, Mullins. However, they don't bother to actually give more than just a passing glance, completely missing the guy obviously laying in the middle of the floor, as the liquid from the roof drips into his mouth, creating another possessed. It's actually strangely appropriate that this film is in the middle of both The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness, because it has the body snatcher aspect of The Thing, and also the supernatural cosmic horror of In the Mouth of Madness. The Apocalypse Trilogy is less a series of 3 different horror films, and more a sliding scale on what kind of horror you would like to see. Catherine is still working on the equations in the book, but she admits to Kelly they've become gibberish at this point. That's when Catherine notices Kelly's bruise has gotten a lot more severe.
Oh, it's just a bruise I got somehow.
Okay, what the fuck? Who looks at that and says, it's just a bruise? Come on, I'm not asking for the characters to have some kind of insider info on the script. Just not completely throw logic and regular human behaviour out the window for said script. Marsh and Walter have been unable to find the missing people, telling Calder about a meeting, who then tries to tell Lisa. However, she's not looking so good, constantly typing "I live" while not even looking at the screen. However, when Calder notices this, the typing addresses him directly, telling him he won't be saved by the Holy Ghost, and rather interesting, it then says he will not be saved by the god plutonium. Now that's a rather strange phrase, the god plutonium. However, and this is just my interpretation, but it has a rather interesting triple meaning. Firstly, it might be said as the god plutonium, as in referring to the actual Roman deity. Or it could be being a bit poetic and using plutonium as a reference for science, the element being a particularly potent symbol for science itself. Or it might be said as the god plutonium, as in the place where one worships to the god, referring to the church. For such a throwaway moment, it has so many interesting interpretations. Calder is soon trapped by Susan, who's looking to make another minion, getting a lot more familiar with Calder than when she did this last time. At the meeting, Birak tries to convince everyone to stay, and Loomis then tells them about the dream, with Marsh detecting tachyon particles. They come to the conclusion that, as I said, the dream is a vision of the future, so Marsh theorizes that if they know the future, they can change it. Of course, forgetting about the potential paradoxes whereby you can't change or avert the future premonitions, because then they wouldn't know about them in the first place. And yeah, we will also be exploring this later. The meeting is cut short when the machines shut down as we see the vat is being moved, but before that can be reacted to, Catherine spots Wyndham out the window, who doesn't sound like himself.
Hello?
Sounds almost like a more advanced version of the homeless lady earlier. And yeah, it's soon revealed to all that Wyndham is dead and being controlled by some unseen force, as it tells them to pray for death before collapsing into a pile of body parts and bugs. But before they can comprehend just what the hell that was, Calder comes up the stairs singing Amazing Grace, banging on a chair. And in front of everyone, he slices open his throat with a piece of wood. Interestingly, making Calder the only person able to resist the vat's influence. Calder wore a cross throughout the film, so it's clear he has faith, especially with him singing Amazing Grace. And with his intensely profuse sweating, he was obviously desperately trying to resist, ultimately believing that death was preferable than being a puppet, illustrating that this is indeed the 100% true-to-form devil, not some ambiguous evil, because it wasn't willpower or mental fortitude that managed to resist this thing, it was faith. And the purpose of Kelly's mark is shown as the possessed have moved the vat in where she's sleeping, as it begins to open, to do God knows what to her. The others have also discovered that the church has been barricaded from the outside by the homeless. You wouldn't think they could get their hands on such a large amount of household items so quickly. Also, can we all agree now that it's obvious how dumb they were to just ignore this army of homeless outside the church? Walter has gone upstairs to find Kelly and finds the vat slowly pooling on the ceiling before being sucked up into her body. Walter's startled by Susan just as Leahy enters the room getting sprayed in the face by Lisa, soon to be another possessed. As Lisa faces off with the others, Loomis locks himself away in a storeroom out of cowardice, but Walter has to protect himself from Susan, and in the corridor, all the possessed, living and dead, converge on the others as they also have to barricade themselves in a room. While hiding from Susan and Lisa, Walter finds out what the liquid in the vat is for, as he finds that Kelly is now very pregnant. Well, that's good enough reason for me to stop drinking this. So yeah, the vat is just Satan's personal little sperm bank, everybody. Doesn't that just make all those scenes of people getting it sprayed in the face and forced to swallow it a lot more awkward now? Birak and the others notice that the sun is coming up, and outside the window, the homeless possessed have it surrounded. Shame there's still no sign of Cooper. And at the same time, Walter tries talking to the two women, not really getting much of a response, noticing that Kelly's skin has started to deteriorate. Although, can I just say that looking at the ladies' faces, Susan definitely got the death stare down pegged. However, Lisa, not so much. Her face is kind of saying, I'm really confused, but I'm too committed to the situation to say anything now. Catherine notices that she can hear Walter through the wall, and although he's trapped, they might be able to break him out. And while they do that, Calder breaks into the room Loomis is hiding in, but fortunately for Loomis, Calder is distracted by the big mirror on the wall, cackling to himself, for reasons we'll soon find out. Marsh has decided to try and make a break for it, jumping out of the window, but the homeless possessed soon start approaching, forcing him back indoors. What were they expecting exactly? He had no weapons, no means of getting out of the alley. These guys are supposed to be scientists, for God's sake. Where are all their critical thinking skills for that little experiment? Afterwards, it's Catherine's turn to receive the dream as it progresses, and we see more of the shadowy figure emerging from the church. When she wakes up, at least Marsh gets some good news, since she wants to be with him, as they kiss. Back with Walter, he's still watching Kelly's progression as she now has lost the bump and her skin has started to peel. It's not really explained why she looks like this, but my guess would be that all the energy and radiation the vat was giving off is not particularly healthy for the human body. And it's at this point that Birak theorizes that the liquid is able to control simple organisms like the ants and also possess people, but requires a host body to carry out its instructions, which is when Walter tells them what's happening with Kelly. And with Catherine remembering Kelly's mark, they begin to understand what's going on, as Kelly wakes up looking a bit more evil than usual, and then does this. Seemingly just to scare the shit out of Walter. So I guess Satan isn't just evil, he's just a bit of an annoying prick as well. Which, let's be honest, if Satan was real, he would be that kind of dick who likes to fuck with you for no reason. Walter gets freaked out enough to start screaming, leading to Marsh and the others to attempt rescuing him, unbarricading the door, as they're immediately attacked, leading to one more of the survivors getting possessed. However, Devil Kelly is stopped in her tracks when she sees a hand mirror on the floor, reacting quite surprised with it. Eventually, Walter manages to get out through the hole in the wall with Lisa following, but getting thrown out the window. We then find out what Devil Kelly wants with the mirror, as she calls to its father, changing the mirror into a portal in a rather impressive special effect that required a pool of mercury. So, not the healthiest, but looks pretty cool. However, it soon becomes clear that the mirror is not big enough to sustain an adequate-sized portal, which is why Calder reacted as he did to the wall-mounted mirror, showing Devil Kelly to it, who creates a portal again. Loomis, however, finally decides to act, using an axe to chop off her arm, as Marsh deals with Calder. The arm grows back, so he tries decapitating her instead, but the head is just put back into place as Loomis is trapped behind a cupboard. I just wanted to come to Loomis's defense here, because he's portrayed as being completely ineffectual to the situation, not just here, but throughout the film. However, I would say that him attacking and trying to stop Devil Kelly was incredibly important, because although he didn't stop her completely, he certainly slowed her down a considerable amount, and he was the only person to do so as well, the others being distracted by the possessed. Devil Kelly continues to reach through the portal, and the other side may look dark and foreboding like an abyss of eternal nothingness. It was actually John Carpenter's pool. And eventually, another, much bigger, clawed and red hand starts emerging from the darkness. But as the creature is pulled from the portal, Catherine makes the decision to sacrifice herself by pushing Kelly into it, and Loomis smashes the portal, severing the connection. So, yay! The day is saved. I mean, most people are dead, and Catherine is trapped in a realm of eternal nothingness, but, you know, yay? No? Okay. Loomis is taken away in an ambulance, convinced he managed to save the day and prevent the future the vision foretold, as Marsh looks at the mirror. However, if I may bring us all the way back to near the start of the film, when the subject of Schrodinger's cat was mentioned. Once again, that idea of something being in constant flux until it's observed. Well, the dream happens again, as we see the whole thing unfold, the narrator telling us it's a live broadcast happening that very second in the future of 1999. But something has indeed changed, as it's not some shadowy figure, but Catherine, possibly possessed in its place. So, much like Schrodinger's cat, it's the observable elements that have become fixed. And I recognise that this is just my interpretation once again, but try to follow me. We have seen the location. That can't be changed. And at first, what form the creature took was in flux, but now, through observation, that has also been set in stone. All of it basically telling us that the future can't be changed, only what form that future event will take. And on that depressing note, Marsh wakes up from the dream finding a bloody Catherine waiting for him in his bed. But don't worry, it's a dream fake-out, as the film ends with Marsh reaching out to the mirror. For what reason, we're not too sure, but perhaps, like Devil Kelly, he thinks he can bring Catherine back from the void. So that was Prince of Darkness. And although over the top in places, and yes indeed very cheesy, I think it's still pretty damn good, and has every right to sit next to The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness. Admittedly, the themes of science and religion that Carpenter started out with didn't really pan out once the film reached its conclusion. The science was pretty much overtaken by the supernatural aspects, and once that happened, there was no bringing it back. But having said that, what we did get was a very interesting film. Of course, although I still maintain this is not a Cthulhu Mythos-style film, it certainly has a few of its staples, so naturally I enjoy this film. And the obvious standouts for this are Victor Wong and Donald Pleasance, who really shine in the scenes where it's just them together discussing or even arguing. When it comes to the Apocalypse trilogy, I'd say watch them all. They're all good in their respective genres, and chronologically, they work as a great sliding scale of those genres too. So now, with my break over, it's back to the Puppet Master series. So until then, I'll see you next time.